Hey, everybody, welcome to GSO Workshop. Thank you for joining us. First of all, we want to thank you for 80.lv for sponsoring and streaming this live for you guys. And of course, thank youing our special guest this month, Veara, Suon. How you doing, Veara?
I'm good, man. Like you usually do. So,
All right. So before we go into and asking you to introduce yourself, uh, just want to let everyone know, Games Go Online is completely free, and winter registration is up. So if you guys want to learn from AAA devs, go to www.gamesgoonline.com and check out the courses that we have available. All right. Enough of a self plug. We're gonna go right into it. Veara,
yep.
why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself so we know why we should think of you as a cool guy?
um, it's just debatable, but yeah. So, been doing animation for about 10 years now, and I've done movies and video games so far. I guess I've done feature as well. So, and you want me to talk about like when I first started or how it all
Yeah,
went
let's
about?
start from the very beginning, man. Where did you go initially to learn about animation, and then we'll go into your first break and everything, and kind of just walk us through kind of like where you went with your career and where you are now.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've always liked cartoons, all that stuff, animation growing up and whatnot. It was, I think, about the age of 14 is when I figured out, like, oh, animation, something I can do as a career. And that's when I think in high school is pretty much when I was looking around for art schools and whatnot. And I went to one art school, which you attended. And that was more of the art school we attended was more of it is for animation that I went for in video games, but it was more general in a way. So by the time we graduated, it was it wasn't so focused on animation. It was enough for me to know, and I still had to build my own demo reel to get out and whatnot. But yeah, I was fortunate enough to at least have a demo reel, and I was able to find a job right after that art school, luckily. But during that time was pretty much when I was working full time there. I was doing some more online schools. I was doing some research, and there was an online school that was getting pretty popular, and at least that was more convenient at that time. So, and I knew my animation skill wasn't, up to par, or it just wasn't good enough, in my opinion. And at the same time, you always want to get better no matter what. Yeah. So, I took an online school during that time as well as doing full time, and I was in video games at that time. And that's after that is when I went. I was sorry. The studio I was at was a small studio called Epicenter Studios.
Mm-hmm.
We were doing like WiiWare and like a Wii game and all that. And that's when, after I finished that, that's when you hit me up, and I went over to 2K Games to work on Bioshock with you.
What?
It was Bioshock 2, by the way.
Bioshock
That's
2.
what it was. Yeah, just got to make sure. But yeah, I was there for a bit, for like 3 years or so, and then we worked on XCOM after that, right? The one that was people didn't want.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, after that, I think what happened after that? Yeah, I went to. I was pretty much done because I felt like that was like a sinking ship over there, which obviously was because it's closed now.
It is closed.
So,
Yes.
yep, 2K Marine is closed. So
Mm-hmm.
at that time, we were just all like, "Oh, it's going down."
Mm-hmm.
So decided to jump ship, or at least venture out more. And at that time, I applied to Bungie. After that, so I was able to work there and to go work on Destiny, the first one. And I finished that and did my year contract there. And then at that point is when I think this was like about 5 years in or so now. That's when I was like, all right, I really want to do movies. I've been doing video games. I enjoy it, but I want to challenge myself, or at least change it up, see what kind of different perspective there is. So after that, that's when I took time off. Like I legit worked on a new demo reel. Even though I was still working on like online school or doing new work, I worked on a completely new one and then cater it towards movies.
Mm-hmm.
And then yeah, I was actually off for a bit. Like it wasn't as easy. So it was like about 8 months that I was off of work. And unfortunately, how it worked was one day a buddy that I took online school with, he shot me an email and said if I was interested in a job, and that job happened to be ILM,
Mm-hmm.
which for a lot of people that's like a dream company.
Right.
So just to have an opportunity, like, of course I'm going to say yes. That was like my dream, one of my dream jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went through an interview, and
ILM, of course, stands for Industrial Light and Magic, right? That's the LucasArts company.
But so I got in there, and that was my first job. And pretty much when I got in there, it's I had to start all over again in a way, because I was considered a junior, so I had to kind of same way I did with video games. You coming in, you don't really know much, so they're gonna slowly help you, I guess, get used to everything.
So how was that? Like that move? Obviously, by that time you were about 5-6 years already as a professional, working on huge titles, and then of course switching industry comes with its pros and benefits. But you accepted a junior position, and it's one of those things. It's like how was that transition? Was it tough for you, or was it one of those things you just went along with it because you knew what the opportunity could bring?
It's a little. I mean, I don't think it was tough because it was ILM. That's like, again, everyone can be different, but for me, it was just like, dude, I'm in like my dream job. I'm gonna do whatever I can, work my way up. That's the attitude I had at that time. In a way, yes, it kind of sucked. In the sense that I had to go backwards in terms of like position. So I was doing junior work, or they didn't see me as like, oh, I'm capable of doing better work or mid-level type of work. They just saw me as a junior, so they gave me juniors kind of stuff. So it's more just handling people's work or fixing things, whatever it is. It's not really handling your own shots, which I was fortunately did. Eventually, they gave me shots. That's how you just somehow work your way up. If you do good work of cleaning things up, or even the very small shots that's in between, they'll give you, and then see how you do with that. So yes, it kind of sucked restarting over, but at the same time, it's kind of like a humbling thing. You kind of see from the ground up how it works. So it's always nice to see that and then go through that in that way. And so while I was there, I was there for working on a few projects. My first film was like Transformers 4. So yeah, and I worked on Turtles and Avengers after that, and then what happened after that? Sorry, I'm just trying to remember.
Well, finally, going into, you've always wanted to work on film. You took all these extra classes. You worked through the game industry. You made the transition. Yeah. You accepted an offer from a well-known effects studio, one of the top, if not the top. And how was it? When you finally, was it everything you expected when you came in the office? You meeting all these people?
Oh yeah. You're talking about like
just the first day or the first week. What was the difference? Because by this time you've been 6 years in the game industry. Now this is your first day in the film industry.
In a way, to me it was kind of crazy because like I was a fanboy because I was going to a studio that was well known, and then you see people that you saw in behind the scene kind of thing. You're seeing these kind of animators that I looked up to or inspired by. So it was kind of like just all this was coming at me at once. And in video games, you can get that experience as well, the same kind of feel, getting your credit and whatnot. But I guess in video games, you don't really see that much of like the names, I guess you could say.
Right.
Whereas movies, I think you see a little bit more. They put out names out there more. I don't know if that makes sense, but I feel like there's more spotlight in people who are in films. Not really everybody. I mean, if you're like juniors, you're not gonna be seen on TV or anything like that. Right. But I guess you get a bigger audience in a way when it comes to movies, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas video games is big as well, but I don't know. It just seems like there's a bigger audience for movies because everybody watches movies. There's less investment involved and whatnot.
Right.
So yeah, it was just really cool, and just the history itself, like being an ILM, Star Wars, obviously. So it's hard to explain, but you're just like that first week, you're just like, oh, I can't believe we're here, made it. Um, it's just a dream come true. It's just we're like high fiving each other, like my coworkers that we first met for the first time, and yeah, it was just like, oh, we're here because we all have different ways of getting there. Like people who are fresh out of school. There's people who's like one guy took like 15 years to even try to get into that place.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody comes from different backgrounds and how they got there. Just yeah, happened to be my story was I went to video games first, and then I took like the detour, I guess. But even though I knew I always wanted to get in film, so it wasn't necessarily it was always in the plan.
Right. So from then, how many years did you spend at? How long did you spend at LAM?
ILM, ILM, yeah. But yeah, I was there for like a little bit over a year. Because in movies, basically you're more on contract, like, and they're very short typically. So, like, for instance, when I first got into ILM, it was literally only supposed to be for a 5-week job. I think 5-6 weeks. That was the initial contract. So, and it just happened to keep extending because I had more work, and then I was doing a good job at the time. So, yeah, it's just one of those things where it slowly went to like 2 months and then 3 months, like literally the last week of each contract or before it expires, they'll contact me. I've heard a story where they contact you the day before. People keep asking like, hey, what's the deal? Am I going to get extended? Or people just look for other jobs. And then, yeah, it got to the point where they just extended me for the long haul in terms of the project, because it was Avengers, and that one I got to be near the beginning of the production when you got to animation. So if you can get on there, that's when you have a little bit longer contract. So that was like a 6 to 8 month contract right there after that. So, and then yeah, that's pretty much how movies work in a sense. Like you rarely have full time people, even supervisors are sometimes not even full time. So yeah, it's unfortunate, but I think in video games are kind of doing it now.
Yeah.
So,
how did you feel about that? Like you're transitioning not just from a different industry, but you used to full time. I'm pretty sure. Do you still get benefits with contract in films?
Yes and no. Depends. It's not. So like I said, so ILM. Let's just say I went to ILM, finished. I went to other studios. Like I went to Blur. I went to Weta. And then I went back to ILM, and then I went to Sony, and after Sony, I went to DD or Digital Domain, and then now currently I'm at Double Negative. So all that, the only one that I had a benefit from, like benefits like insurance, is ILM and Double Negative, the one I'm currently at. All the other ones were no insurance, no vacation pay. No, I take it back. Sony too. So 3 of them. Sony had insurance and vacation and sick days as well. But they were all contracts. None of them were full time at all. I would say the average is between 3 to 6 month contracts. So it's pretty much the life of a film animator.
That being the life, I can't imagine it being because you just named like 8 different places, right? And you're talking about maybe a span of 5 years.
Yeah.
And not just different states. We're talking about countries, and we're talking about New Zealand, Weta. You're talking about Canada, DD, Double Negative, Sony, I believe, right? ILM in San Francisco. I'm surprised.
Yep.
And then you were at Blur, right? In Los Angeles. Yeah. So, what's your advice for people who are looking to get in or switch over? Like, is it completely up to the individual if they have a family? What do you recommend?
Yeah, no, I think it is up to the individual. I mean, if anything, you should get all the information you possibly can. Like I said, for stuff like this, when you're doing Q&As and whatnot, you hear different lifestyles. But I do feel like movies is not as stable. So when I talk to other animators, it's an agreement that it's not as stable because we're all doing contracts and whatnot. So looking into that, and also you got to understand like this industry and games or films, we do a lot of overtime.
Mm-hmm.
It, and I will say it's not necessarily like they're not forcing you to do overtime. So I know some people don't really. Usually, it's more senior guys who kind of lay back on the overtime. But yeah, and let's just say like at Weta, I don't do it anymore, but I was doing like 90-hour weeks, man. Like, it was
Jeez.
crazy.
For
Even at
how
ILM, I
long?
was doing 90 hours.
For
Yeah,
what
that
length?
was at Weta was the craziest because I was doing like 70 to 80 to 90s for 6 months straight. Like it was. I don't think I remember it dipping down below 70 while I was there ever, except for maybe the first week or so. So, and it just recently I just got off a crunch now. And I was doing, now that I've been doing it for a while, I kind of don't go crazy, but I was doing 60s, in the 60s. I try to go down to 50s because I try to have life more.
Right.
I don't remember video games though. I remember like in Bungie, it was actually really cool because they were pretty organized by the time I got there. I mean, I heard the crazy stories from the Halo days, but
Right.
by Destiny, they figured it out in terms of like we don't have to do this crazy overtime if we manage it correctly. So I did a 50-hour week, maybe 4 times while I was there, and I was there for a year. So
That's not too bad.
yeah, it's not that bad. 50 hours wasn't crazy. It's just like an extra 2 hours and whatnot, and you figure out the hours yourself there. I don't know how it is now since Destiny 2, but from what I hear, I was talking to my friends there. They're just like, no, we're not doing crazy hours or anything, no crunch. So
That sounds about right. Like 50 hours, maybe 60 at some game companies. What
yeah.
was where? So let's kind of draw this comparison, right? Like what's a typical day, maybe on average, when you are crunching on a game versus a film? Like, what's your day? What does your day look like?
You mean how many hours am I doing?
Yeah, well, just coming in. What time do you come in? What time do you take breaks? What time do you go home? What is that? Paint a picture
Okay,
for
what's up?
us.
I'm one of those people who just always go like later on in the day, just
Right,
because I'm not a morning person.
right.
So,
10, 11?
but I would say most people go in by 9.
Okay.
I'll try to go in by 9. Let's just say that. Um, the last one I did get up at 7 a.m.
Mm,
just because I want to leave a little bit early. But I was doing 12-hour days, so
right.
yeah, I'll try to leave by 7 or 8 p.m. That was my goal.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas at Wet, I was leaving like at 2 a.m., 3 a.m. It's
Jeez.
crazy. Yeah, I didn't really have much of a life there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was. I mean, in terms of a schedule, like when you go on the first day, everyone has their shots or whatever task they have to do, and it's the same as video games. It's just figuring out what your task is, and then you animate or you plan, do whatever you got to do in terms of the animation process. You show it to your leads, you get feedback, and eventually you show it to your supervisor. We call it dailies for people who are new to the industry or don't know anything about the industry. It's basically a meetup with your supervisor, and they give you feedback because they don't really do one-on-ones because they're just so busy.
Mm-hmm.
And this is talking about strictly for films. And yeah, it's just you get your feedback. Sometimes you could send them a message through whatever chat you have at your workplace. And if they're free, they'll respond back to you and give you feedback through there. But typically, there's a time set each day, and you just turn in your work, and then they'll do it on the big screen, and they'll give you feedback. And if you pass, or you pass the supervisor's whatever, what do you call it? Whatever pass you're doing, then it goes to the client, and the client will pretty much take a look and give their feedback to the point where it gets to the finished product. But it's always a back and forth. They give you notes. It's crazy. Like there's a lot of things that keep being asked, or at least the typical question is like, oh, how much animation do you have to do per day, like seconds and whatnot. It's kind of hard to answer that question because mainly because you do have a deadline, but the amount of notes that keeps going back and forth, it's impossible to kind of predict because sometimes it just might be easy and there's barely any notes.
Right.
And then sometimes a client being so picky, like they don't know what they want. So that right there, something that was set for like, for instance, 3 days, could take like 2 weeks. And then also you're at the same time you're doing other shots, so you put that on hold because you're waiting for it to get feedback on. So you should be having more work to work on. So yeah, it's hard to give an exact answer for that type of question.
Right.
Even though we didn't go in Q&A yet, I just guessed. Yeah. Anyways.
Yeah. Well, I kind of want to go into this portion of the interview here. Like, I know you're cool and good. You know you're good, but if the watchers, the audience that haven't clicked on your reel, do you mind kind of going over some of your work right now?
Oh yeah, sure. Let's go take it. So I had some show and tell, I guess you say. Let me know if I gotta share the screen, right?
Right. Yeah. And while Veara or V is pulling up his stuff, you guys leave questions wherever you're watching, Facebook, YouTube. Just leave your questions there. I'll make sure to ask them. We're going to have a Q&A at the end, so any questions that you have, be sure to ask him.
All right, can you see?
Yes.
Good?
Yep.
Okay. So this is pretty much my video game reel. And I'll just show you first. This is what I did. Some of the stuff I did during my career in video games. There's no audio, I don't think. So.
Audio, yeah. So in a typical game reel, like what do professionals or companies look for from a student from an actual professional? Is there a difference? What essentially makes a game reel successful for applying for jobs?
Yeah. So when it comes to video games, I think it's hard to just say there's one perfect game reel. It's more of catering towards your specific studio or the industry you're going into. So like I said, this is my video game reel. So this is something I would apply to game studios. I would not typically apply to a film studio just because they're looking for something different. Whereas video games, they want to see basically anything that can fit in their video game, things that you're typically doing in a video game environment, meaning it can be blending of animation, it could be like hit reacts, it could be deaths. Oh, this one has audio.
Yeah, we can't hear it, but you can.
My fault. Well, I'll just turn it down on my side. Yeah. So when it comes to reels for video games, I would advise people to do anything that you kind of see in video games. That could be a run cycle. It could be any sort of cycle that blends into something else. Like when you're playing a video interactive game, right? How do you see it? You could fake it. It doesn't have to be an actual. Like in this. Oh, what the hell is that? Showing something else. Let me see if I can loop it. Sorry.
No worries.
But yeah, like for instance, in this game, I'll just walk you through it. Right here, it's more of like it's not a cycle or anything. It's just more of like one of those quick script kind of animations. That makes sense to you?
Yeah.
It's not something that's going over and over. It's just like a really quick, not cinematics, but it's in-game animation that's just like a one-time play.
Right.
It's a scripted event.
Right.
Whereas this one, that was one I earlier was just playing. These are hit reacts. The other one's a taunt, hit reacts. So these are things that you'll see while you're, this is a first-person shooter game. So it'd be nice to see like a third-person perspective, and then if you can somehow, if you have a rig to show first-person, do it. I don't think there's any rig that I know of that you could do or play with, but right. I've seen people do it though. It's possible. So it's just kind of cool because the reason why it's good to show is because like these people who are evaluating you want to see if you can do their kind of work. Like, and that goes to films. It's not just video games. So whatever your industry you're applying to, whether it be VFX in movies or feature work, Pixar, Disney, you have to do their kind of work. And video games, you have to do like the blending, I don't want to say boring, but
Mm-hmm.
more the tedious work of like, you know, it's not as cinematic that most people always want to work with because yeah, it's more technical stuff
Right.
that blend.
So, like, when you're animating for games, you were talking about making loops, even first-person animation, sometimes cinematics. Uh, is it typically assigned once you start working at a place, or do people hire you specifically for that task? I mean, how does it work, the hiring process?
Oh, sorry, was it for video games or movies?
For games, right? So you
Okay.
just named three different types of animation in games, basically. So
Yeah.
is that sometimes just everyone gets a piece of everything, or is there a specialized animator that's uh, used for first person animation, another one who's more game cycles and looping? How does it get divided up, and is that something that you have to tailor your portfolio to if you prefer one thing over the other?
Yeah, I mean, that's something you really want to do. So, for instance, in video games, like I said, I've been away for like 5 years now. But
Mm,
if I remember correctly, or now, I've seen like there's pretty much a split between cinematic animators, which
right.
is pretty much games, um, and then there's gameplay animators, and those are the ones that I'm pretty much showing you here.
Mm-hmm.
So, to be honest, I would have a mix. Uh, just so you can so you can show your range. And that doesn't hurt you, right? It's like one of those things where it's like, all right, it's good to show range,
Right.
but unless you specifically for something, and then if you're working at a certain studio or you want to go for a certain studio, look at their style, like the style of animation they do. The this kind of animation is not gonna work. Like me showing this is not gonna probably get eyes to say yes to when it comes to like fighting games, for instance, because they don't see any combos, they don't see anything that they can use in their game. So if I were to apply to, was it Another Realm or something, the Mortal Kombat games,
Right.
yeah, I would do something more uh, fight style related type of animations.
Right.
It'll be way much easier for them to see like, oh, okay, he's capable of doing our kind of animation needs. And they do have cinematics, so if you're going towards that, do something more cinematic like, especially with the fatalities. Uh, whatever you feel like would work for them.
Right.
Uh, but yeah, same applies to go like I said, films. Like you have to work on more cinematic kind of work because film is different. It's not from a player's perspective anymore.
Right. So let's talk about that, right? You're crossing over. You're talking about,
Yeah.
you were working at Bungie, and you initially applied to ILM and finally got it. What reel did you use for that, right? You didn't have a resume in the film industry, and you were not exactly using your work from the game industry to get you that job. So what would you recommend for people who are trying to cross over?
Yeah. So for film is a little different. Like I said, yeah. So this is my reel for like movies that I would apply with
Hmm.
for specifically. But I will say this is the type of reel that I would never apply to a Disney or Pixar. They're more character-based animation. So this is more VFX for like Avengers and whatnot. But yeah, when you look at this, is like it's basically working off camera. Whatever you see on the camera is going to be seen on the big screen, right?
Hmm.
So that's pretty much it. Like you're working with animation that's just on camera. Whereas video games, like I said, it's a lot of technical work behind it for things to blend and whatnot. So they want to see things like that. And it's okay to put some cycles in there, but really, when it comes to VFX type of reel, what I would do is show something a little bit more, just longer in terms of animation and like something more a little bit more cinematic and like camera work. There's a lot of camera work. That I think honestly you can get away with a lot of stuff in VFX with just camera work.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to just the animation, they like to see creatures. They just want to see good body mechanics. Um, and they don't really care about dialogue too much because you're not going to be doing that much dialogue unless you go to a show like Ninja Turtles, for instance, that had a lot of dialogue with the turtles and whatnot. That'd be helpful to know. But yeah, I would usually recommend maybe one or two to show dialogue.
Right.
But I would mostly show kind of like, if you can, put some creature work in there, show some body mechanics, do a cinematic type of shot that's that's showing off like your camera work as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's always kind of like a nice thing. I mean, how do you flip this?
So this reel kind of combines. You were talking about two different reels when you're applying to movies. You're talking about effects, visual effects, and then animation. Basically, you're talking about Pixar, like.
Yeah, so that's, I would say, a character animation reel. So when it comes to like a Disney, sorry, when it comes to like Disney, I would show more acting type of work,
Mm-hmm.
and that's pretty much it. I mean, you can show some body mechanic work, which is good. You always want to, but what they want to see is you showing some sort of emotion, like something behind the character. It's not just good animation, which they want to see, of course, but they want to know that what the character's thinking, right? Like, you're pretty much being an actor behind the scenes, basically.
Right.
You want to be able to kind of show that to the audience and connect with them. It's not about cool stuff anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, dude. I don't know why this is not playing anymore.
So you were talking about transitioning from job to job. Multi-contract can range from 3 months to 8 months. How often are you updating your reel? And is there a certain method to do it? Because as anyone knows, that's a professional. Putting together a reel takes some time. You got to get the shots, compose it. And if you're working in the film industry, like, you have to line it up correctly so that you have a job as soon as one ends. Otherwise, you're looking at 2-3 months without one, right? It's just the way it works. So, what's your advice, and what has worked for you to prepare you for the next job? I mean, how far ahead do you think about making your reel to apply to other jobs before your current one ends?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one. Like, in terms of, some people just wait it out and see if they get an extension. Whereas for me, it is also dependent on when the film comes out on DVD.
Right.
Because in theaters, you can't use any of the shots,
I see.
But yeah, usually it sucks, but you have to wait for the DVD to come out. And finally, however way you want to, look for your shots in the movie, you go grab them. But you can request, depending on what studio you worked at, request for the shots, and they'll give you a file.
Mm-hmm.
They'll send you a file, or at least ILM. I don't think they do it anymore, but they gave me like a CD of all my shots that I did there. So that's nice. But yeah, I mean, you have to apply with whatever you have, right? Like, you cater. It kind of sucks if you don't have enough work. But that's just how it kind of goes. You just that's why I say it's kind of whatever industry you're trying to work for, then kind of cater towards that and do the best you can towards that. And then eventually your work starts to build up, and you start to have more professional work. And hopefully it's good enough, like, make sure you do a good job at your workplace and have good enough shots or animation to be able to put on your reel, and then, pretty much apply to the next place. Typically, I like to look 3 months in advance when it comes to films. Video games is different because I was there full time, so I wasn't really looking until I was ready to leave. Except for Bungie, I was there for contract, but they did want me longer.
Right.
But I told them at that point, I was like, hey, I want to go to film, so this is something I've been wanting to do for a while. So they respected that, and they said to come back anytime, which is pretty cool. But yeah, it's a little different when you're searching around, but everyone has a different timeline. Sometimes I wait to the very end to see if they extend me because I want to stay at that job. It a couple times it didn't work out for me.
Mm-hmm.
Other times it worked out perfectly because like by the time the contract ended, didn't have any work, I was able to move on to the next job because I was scheduled. And all the what do you call it? All the recruiters know when you're talking to them like how this industry is.
Right.
So you can say like, hey, I won't be able to start until this date because my contract ends this time or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all about communication.
Right. And so here's an interesting because you have the advantage of working in both industries where 5 years ago your screen's exploding. 5 years ago you you left Bungie to get into the film industry, but at that state you kind of knew what was going on, even though there was stability, right? There were a lot of full-time jobs, but I wonder what your opinion is, because to me it felt like a lot of the jobs are turning more and more contracts, and even to this stage, like bigger companies are hiring more contracts than before. And now that you're in the film industry where it's all about contracts, and very little people have full-time gigs at a visual effects studio, like how are you feeling about the stability of things as an artist in both industries? Like your personal feeling.
My personal feeling is, well, this personally, I love it, just because I'm the type of person who likes to jump around anyway. I get a little bit bored. I think that's the reason why I kind of left video games. Is I get bored of repetition, doing the same things over and over. In video games, it takes years to put at least one of the bigger games, out. So whereas movies, the fact that I'm working on it for 3 to 6 months only, it's nice. It's like, okay, I work on this project, jump onto a new project that's totally different in a way. I mean, you might do some sort of animation that's very similar, but they're all different. I don't think you animate ever the same. And I'm not saying you do it in video games, but it's hard to do so many different hit reacts and deaths and whatnot, and make it feel different each time. Luckily, we have mocap. Oh, that's another thing I didn't bring up was, if you can somehow get your hands on some mocap and clean it up, it's nice to show that on your reel for whatever studio you're working or applying for that want to know if you can do mocap work and, clean it up or change it at any time. All right, let me go back. I keep jumping around a lot. But yeah, in terms of disability, it doesn't bother me that much because I don't have a family, I don't have kids or anything like that. I mean, so, and another thing is that's great. Like me personally, when I do contract work, after each contract, you do so much OT. Like I like to go traveling, so after each contract, I usually take a week or two and then go travel to some country or something like that. So that's something I personally like to do, and experience. So, and you don't feel like that, like you're quitting, right? Like it's kind of tough when you're in a full-time job and you're like, okay, I want to go,
right,
do something else. As a contractor, you're like, oh, well, my contract's up. You could say no to them, like, plan to do this or go here, just because you're interested. So if you really don't like it there, then hey, I could just leave after this contract.
right.
Whereas video or full time, it's, again, this is all different, right? Like this is just me personally. For full time, I feel kind of bad when I take time off for like a month or whatever. I would just for contract, I'll just time up my my vacations. I'm like, okay, I don't get paid. It sucks, but you do so much OT that hopefully, if you save, you do your financial manage it correctly, then you should be able to survive, and then do what you got to do.
Right.
So
being in the film industry for a while, like you were saying, you're a single guy, you're able to jump around, you're able to do this. Do you see a lot of family guys doing this as well? I mean, what? Of course, you can't speak for them, but from your perspective, what do you see where
Yeah,
you have a family and you want to do this?
yeah, that's pretty much. They do exactly the same thing that I do in terms of jumping around, but they're just a little bit more mindful of who is affecting, right? Like they have their kids and whatnot. If they're fortunate, they usually want a longer term contract. That's what I do notice about more family type of guys. Um,
You're talking
just
about a year, 2 years type of
yeah,
thing?
or whatever, 2 years if they can work it out, or they just keep waiting to the end of the contract, hoping to get an extension. Uh,
Like, how close to the end are you talking about? Like a day before or a week before? Like, how close do they cut it?
it depends on the studio you're at. Like
Okay.
some people are good at telling you beforehand. I don't want to say which studios, but I know some studios that have done it the day before, and they actually like, oh, hey, we can extend you. Can you do it? And there's this one crazy story where one person didn't get an answer back, kept asking their HR like, hey, is me? Did you hear anything back? Will I be extended or any other projects? And they're like, oh, we don't have anything for you right now. And that person pretty much uh, was leaving for the airport, and they get a call like, "Hey, can you come and we have an extension if you want to take you."
Dang, right
Like
when
it's
he's
crazy. Like there's some stories like that. It's just how it works. So you just got to plan. That works for you. Do whatever plan that works for you.
So
But
what is it exactly? They just suddenly get
it's
funneled more money, or they just looked at all the shots and like, oh, we need more? Like, what?
yeah,
Why?
it's just
Why
more
is
of
it to the
like
wire?
that's a tough one. I mean, you probably better ask one of those HR people or recruiters, to be honest. But it's just more of like there's not enough work, or they got more shots, or the crunch. They just didn't manage it correctly. Like, okay, we
Nice.
we need to extend it past that. We didn't schedule it correctly, right? So yes, it's really tough. I'm sure on their side of trying to figure it out because I'm sure they're not like, oh, we want this guy to be gone or anything. It's just like they can't confirm until they have their own confirmation. It's just more of them saving their butts too. Like instead of it would piss somebody off. They're like, hey, yeah, we have work for you, and they have no work. Like
Mm-hmm.
and to them, they're losing. It's a business. They're losing money. They're losing something. So I can try to understand it from their side too. Like, yeah, it sucks. I don't like it, but yeah, some studios are better at it. I would say. Uh, yeah, that's just how it works. I just try to just go with the flow, and then I just prepare for it all. That's the way how I approach it. So.
Well, speaking of going with the flow and preparing for things, it's pretty well known that you moved around a lot in the last 5 years, right? Um,
Mhm.
like kind of walking through everything. You've been in different continents. You were at New Zealand, San Francisco, Canada, now Canada. Uh, like, do you just travel light? Like, how exactly are you able to just go at a moment's notice and just pack things and just work crazy overtime hours while you're in a whole different continent? Like, how was the other side of things, like the social life, meeting new people, getting used to things again, having a life, right?
Yeah.
When you're not overtiming, like, what was that aspect when you're not working? What are you doing?
Well, start off. I did only pack usually like one, you know, one bag or one luggage, and then travel with that. Just because I usually look for like a furnished type of place, and if I know I'm gonna only be there for like 6 months or whatever, I can survive off of that. Um,
Are you doing like Craigslist? Like, what was your go-to
yeah,
for
pretty
getting?
much. Like
Okay.
you had because it's hard when if you're trying to get your own place, it makes it tougher because everybody wants to do a lease for like a year or whatever.
Yeah.
For instance, like me here coming to Canada, I kind of just I didn't know what kind of how long I was gonna be here, but looking for a place was kind of tough. You can go on Craigslist and then look for sublets or anybody willing to give a shorter term lease, or you can look for people who are looking for roommates. There's all different kind of ways you can look for it. Um, but I wanted my own place, and Vancouver, where I'm at now, is one of the better places to be at for animation now because it's basically the new LA because a lot of the jobs came out here. a lot of the studios closed down. Specifically, VFX kind of studios came up here just to save some money. That whole business side. Uh, so yeah, it's when I'm done with one contract, I can just jump to the other one because there's a lot of studios out here to apply for. I just go through figuring out like the work permit situation. Luckily, being American, it's not as hard in terms of what's behind the scenes. Whereas my other friends from India or friends from like South America, they have a harder time to get through that process. It takes like 6 months. So places are not even willing to work with them. They're like, oh, we need somebody quickly. So we need someone who can, we can take the process like a week or something.
Right.
I think I don't really know behind it, but that's my assumption. And
is this for Canada? Was it the same thing
this
in
is
New
Canada
Zealand?
in particular. Weta was pretty easy. Like a lot of I think they want people to come out there, and Canada too. Like, they want people to come out here too, but it's a little bit of a process. It's not as easy. Whereas New Zealand is smaller. I guess I don't know what it is, but it just seems easy. And it could be just being at Weta. They're big and they can bring whoever they want. Makes it an easy process. They took care of everything. Like all I had to do was sign. Whereas like at Canada, yeah, I had like my lawyers and whatnot, or their lawyers. They had their lawyers and went through the process, and I just signed some papers. But my other friends were like South America. I had to do like this whole medical exam and like I forgot, like police records or something like that.
Right.
I forget. They didn't go through a lot, and I was like, yeah, I didn't have to go through any of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it depends on which country you're working at, So yeah, and I've only worked at 2 different countries aside from the States.
Right. Well, that's plenty, dude. Well, I mean, we're about 10 to 15 minutes left. Gonna go switch over to Q&A. As mentioned before, hey, you guys, wherever you are watching this, just post your questions, and I'll do my best to ask them for you. It's open for anyone, so go ahead and do it. So I'm gonna start out with a question from a mutual friend, right? From Richard Lico.
Oh, snap. What's up?
Ever think you'll return to the game industry, and why or why not?
Oh man. By the way, Lico is like one of the most talented animators out there. Like, go look him up.
Shout out to
Just saying, he's he was my lead or supervisor over at Bungie. Now he's doing his own thing at another studio, and he's killing it. But in terms of me going back to video games, I do see myself, like, I love video games. I miss it, all that. I can see myself going back to video games eventually.
Is there a particular project that you would love to come back to?
There's no particular project. It's just more of like, even though I see the video game kind of going to the contract kind of ways, it is still a little bit longer contract. So if I do notice, like, if I want to get, some stability, I may go that direction. And also, I just kind of miss the video game kind of vibe. So I don't know. I've been going back and forth. Like, at my career right now, I've been going really back and forth to, like, should I go back? I know I'm gonna miss movies. And at the same time, I'm still reaching goals. Like, I've hit my big goals of going to, like, ILM, Weta, Bungie, but there's still Disney. There's something that I'm still reaching for. So currently, I'm working on a reel that's catered towards them. So basically, I'm doing acting type of shots right now. So yeah, so I think I need to hit that goal before I even think about going back to video games, to be honest.
Okay.
Like, it's a goal I need to hit. So I'm working my butt off right now.
Sweet. All right, so this question comes from Veen. He's asking about mocap, all right? There's a lot of companies that would ask for experience. You kind of covered this a bit before, like a company like Naughty Dog, who relies heavily, like any realistic game, really. Do art schools or resources out there usually teach you about mocap?
Yeah, I think during my time when I went to, like, those schools, they didn't really have it available. It was kind of a new thing, but it's gotten so big that mocap is being used everywhere now. Video games, movies. Like, seriously, you should probably know your mocap now, or at least understand it. in some ways. But I think there are some online school, like I think iAnimate, it's has some sort of classes for that. But from my understanding, some art schools are trying to incorporate mocap into the curriculum, so you kind of get an understanding of it all. So I would do my research. I'm sorry that I don't actually know specifically where to go, but I do know they're incorporating it more. And yeah, like I know you can, unless you're got some money and get a suit that you can work with, like the suit that you wear, put on, and then transfer it over. But yeah, it's kind of hard to get your hands on mocap so you can put it on your reel, unless you seriously work at a studio. But yeah, I think there are some schools that are offering it now. I remember seeing iAnimate on the online school. So
Right. Okay. So Jacob Ferrant, he's asking, what do you do in your free time? Like working on all these projects, always changing locations? Do you recommend online courses? There's a lot of questions. If you had the time, would you be looking for more work or learning more? Is there any sense of balance? So I'll ask the first one. I'll break it down. So what do you do in your free time? You kind of answered this before, but maybe just kind of going over, what are the main things? Do you still keep up
like my personal life?
Your personal life, your heavy lifting. Like, what exactly are you doing?
Are you trying to get deep? Where it's like,
it's like it's hard to maintain. I mean,
Yeah,
it is
yeah.
exciting, right? I'm sure going to different locations, but there's a certain point where you're like, you need some kind of normalcy and routine to kind of stay balanced, right? So
Yeah, I mean, I still like. I'm one of those people who preach to have your own life, like still have a life. Yes, I may talk about all those crazy hours, but I still try to have like something that I'm personally still into. Like I always try to get my, go to the gym. That's something I just grew up always just need that kind of like pump. Playing sports in some ways, basketball or something like that. I try to look for kind of like that environment. And yeah, I've been really into like dancing, like salsa and stuff like that. That's like a new thing I picked up, but I'm really into it. So it's just a matter of finding the time and making time for it. Like I said, these people are not forcing you to do overtime, but you can kind of like, hey, I can't. This is the time I cannot do, and usually work with you unless you have like a really messed up studio who's just controlling.
yeah,
But for those type of studios, but yeah, yeah, just make that time. I highly recommend it actually because you kind of go crazy when you're doing too much overtime. Fortunately, when I did all this crazy overtime, I had good people like at Weta. I had really cool people that I was able to hang out with after work. Even though we can barely find any time, but when we did, we all hung out, did whatever, like go check out the scenery and whatnot, or do some sort of sports because that's the people I usually lean towards. So yeah, you can make time. It's just all about managing it, really. Like people who have families, you just gotta like the people I knew who had families fit in a schedule for their family. Even though we're doing crazy overtime, they would always fit in dinner. Like, no, I'm gonna go home, have dinner with my family, do family stuff, and then come back to work. So it's all about managing what works for you. And these guys are, like I said, they're not forcing you. It's just they're asking you to do all this all the time, and you just kind of decide whether you want to get some OT money or not.
right.
So
We'll squeeze in a couple more questions. We're close to hitting that hour. So DSon16, he asked, I kind of feel like I know your answer to this question, but if you could go back and give advice to yourself on making your career path easier, what would you say or do? Rewinding it all the way back to the Art Institute, right?
mm-hmm.
And you want to go in film eventually, but you wanted to go in games as well. Anything that you would do differently to make things easier? Shortcuts.
There is that's a tough one. People don't want to hear this kind of answer. There's like no shortcut really. It's it's just, I mean, yes, like I said, catered towards. I think I was trying to do too much. Like the biggest advice I can give is just don't try to do something that is out of reach in a sense. Like you want to stay, you always want to challenge yourself, but I think a lot of students' mistakes these days is going too far and not knowing how to accomplish that challenge that they gave themselves. So instead of doing something simple that to make it really good, like you should have at the foundation of it a really good animation principles, pretty much your mechanics, or it should all be good. And everything on top of that, when it comes to personality or flashy bits and whatnot, should come later. Like you'll eventually get it going. But trying to do like a crazy action scene and like with 5 characters fighting, like if you've never done it before and you're not really learning. You're just so focused on trying to do some sort of animation that's challenging instead of like
Hmm.
instead of just doing something that you're comfortable or at least somewhat comfortable with and pushing yourself to grow. um, I mean, I'm this is me counter like a counter to that. It's just like you should always challenge yourself.
Hmm.
But I think I was doing too much crazy work that was that wasn't helping me learn, like get my animation better. It was just more like, oh, I'm trying to accomplish something,
Hmm.
but the animation is kind of crap. So work small and then really get good at that small thing and then move on to the next step. That's why people always see the bouncing ball so much. But as that is the foundation of, if you can't, I've seen somebody work on the bouncing ball and they couldn't even get that right. So if you can't even get that bouncing ball right, what makes you think you can do something a little bit more advanced? You might, but uh, it's really good to have that foundation first before you just do something really challenging. Like I think a lot of students do that. It's just take something that's just way above their like skill set at the time, and you're gonna learn something. That's a great thing. But I think I should have been more patient with the learning process and really focus on my foundations.
Right. One last question. This is from Mohammed Raza. So, how do you see your career in animation turning when you become old, in your senior age, where your body can't support you moving around as much, or you simply, there's not enough time where companies require you, right? You can't do overtime as much. Like, how do
Right.
you see yourself existing in the film
Yeah, like
industry
how remember towards
and
retirement
games?
or something.
Yeah, like, where do you see yourself 40, 50? Like,
Yeah,
this lifestyle that you're talking about is glamorous and exciting.
like
It
a
sounds
younger.
awesome, but old V can't party as hard, right? So what does old V do?
That's a tough one. I mean, a lot of people usually by that age or so get to more promoted positions, supervisors. So you're not having to sit down or do. But the thing is, the stress level is still up there. Like I'm seeing my supervisors or people who are high up there still stressing out over or doing crazy hours too. Um, for me personally, I don't know. I mean, I have other animators around me that's like in their 40s and 50s that's still doing what I do right now. So that gives me hopes of like, okay, I could still probably do it. I know one guy, just only one that I met that's in their 60s at least.
Dang.
Uh, and but he's and I don't know. Like, I don't see myself doing it at the age of 60. At that point, I'm hoping maybe do another career that's a little bit less of a stressful job. Um, but if not, do something more promote, like something of a bigger role that doesn't require uh, too much hands-on and just like um, helping grow. Maybe a teacher, to be honest, that'd be kind of great. Like it's just more helping, the next generation become better and give as much as much of my knowledge to the future animators. So that I can see that happening. Like I know one guy who retired and just went to teaching.
Hmm.
So yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's about an hour, you guys. I want to thank you, V, for joining us and
Problem, man.
giving us your wisdom in animation and movie and games. I want to thank 80.lv for streaming this event. I want to thank everyone who showed up, asking awesome questions. Hopefully you find this useful. This will be archived. A lot of you guys were asking that. It will be on 80.lv's account, YouTube, Facebook, as well as Gamesco Online. So thank you guys. Thank you everybody. Hey, if you want to be mentored by someone like V or exactly like V, visit Gamesco Online. You can email us info@gamescoonline.com. You know, he can help you with your own personal career questions, you know, paths of how to get to where you want to be. So yeah, thank you everybody, and see you guys
Thank you,
next
guys.
month. Look out for the next workshop. Okay, guys.